Hey, writer, if you're ready to level up, then buckle up. Get your pen and paper ready. It's time for another episode of the Art and Business of Writing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jones, where today I'm joined by John David Mann. And of course, if you're no stranger to my podcast, you know that I've had John on several times. But this time, John is bringing with him a very special guest. John is bringing his wife, Anna Gabriel Mann, whom he's co-written the book, The Go-Giver Marriage with. If you know about John co-authored the book The Go-Giver with Bob Burg almost a decade and a half ago. It's one of my favorite books just about how to sell relationally. And so they decided that they wanted to write a book in the series called The Go-Giver Marriage to talk about how to build better marriages. And so John, as you may or may not know, has co-authored 30 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers and 5 national bestsellers. His wife, Anna, has a master's degree in clinical psychology and dance movement from Antioch, New England, where she specializes in working with adults and family therapy. So this is going to be a great episode. I think you're going to love it. These two have dreamed about writing this book for a long time. I think since about 2009, they said. And so what we're going to get in today is we're going to get into the Go-Giver marriage story. We're going to talk about the structure of the book, which is part parable, part practical application, and it's kind of the marriage of nonfiction and fiction in one book. We're going to talk about how John and Anna wrote the book individually and how they came together as spouses to co-author the book, and really, how do you really write with a spouse? So that's something interesting for people who may be thinking about that or exploring that topic. And we're going to be talking about how the book is to be read and why it's not just another marriage book. You know, typically we associate marriage books with people being dragged into some sort of therapy session, but this isn't like, this book is nothing like that. This book is very, very proactive. It's very positive and encouraging, and it's a very different type of book on marriage. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about ways authors can build communities around books, because they did something very unique with this book. And I don't want you to miss that at the end. I don't want to give too much away now, but they've developed community around this book. And I think authors can really take away something amazing from that as they write books and try to build readers into the book. So anyway, without further ado, John and Anna Mann. Hey, John, welcome back to the show.
You're kidding, man. It's a pleasure to be here, always.
Yeah, glad to have you back. And this time you have a special guest with you. So for our new listeners, first introduce yourself, tell us about you, and then tell us who you brought with you.
Okay, sure. So I am John David Mann. I write books. I didn't always write books. I started out in life as a classical musician. I played the cello. I was a composer. I started a high school with some friends. I started some businesses. I did a variety of things, kind of a grab bag of careers, or maybe it was more like a pinball game of careers. And then I landed in honestly, Chris, it wasn't until close to 50. I mean, it's like in my late 40s. I finally landed in this career channel as an author, and I've published over 30 books. I've found my life's calling on my passion. I love writing books. This last year, I published my first novel, a thriller. I co-authored the book The Go-Giver, which we'll probably talk about, which has been one of my more successful books. It sold over 1 million copies, much to my utter delight and amazement. And this year I'm publishing with a co-author who I will introduce in a moment, another Go-Giver book. The Go-Giver spawned a couple of sequels: Go-Giver Leader, Go-Giver Sell More. It was a sales book, a leadership book, and now we're putting out a book called The Go-Giver Marriage, which I co-wrote with my best friend, who also happens to be my wife, who is the person I'll be introducing, and that is Anna Gabriel Mann.
Hey, Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm clinically trained in psychology, and I've been a therapist for most of my life. I co-founded the first Chinese medical college in New England. I was professor at the graduate level for a number of years. I've been an educator, a speaker, and a corporate consultant. And this is a book that I've dreamed about writing for years because I care deeply about this topic. I was a family therapist. And so I'm just so happy to be here and happy to share about the book.
Yeah, and so, John, as you know, I'm a huge fan of The Go-Giver. It's funny, the other day I was tweeting about how authors, shouldn't fixate on word counts, as you know, and citing some of my favorite books, which are value packed but really short on page count. And then Bob chimed in because I listed The Go-Giver as one of my favorite short books, and he had chimed in, was like, "Oh, thank you so much, glad to be on the list." But I mean, as you know, the book has grown into a series of books, and now you and Anna have penned one. And she, as she just said, it was a dream of hers and yours to co-author this book together for many years. So tell me, why was writing a parable about marriage important to you?
I'll let you go first on that one, sweetheart.
Well, when I first read The Go-Giver, and this was before it was published or even sold to a publisher, I said to John right on the spot, this would make an incredible book about relationships and about marriage. And, he agreed. We both that launched the dream. And yet there were other books, this was really, The Go-Giver was a book about business and how to behave and be in business, how to be someone who adds value to someone's life. And this book, needed to wait as some of those other titles were coming forward. But when the pandemic began, John and I just looked at each other and said, it's time.
And so what was the experience like for you, John? Was that the same, because I know that you've written the Go-Giver books, and the first one came out, 2005, 2007?
Yeah, it's funny because you're right. The first guess was right, actually. 2005 is when the first draft slipped out of my desktop printer, but it went through this journey, which I think you and I have talked about. It was rejected by over 20 publishers and went through an extensive rewrite. So before it actually was published, which was the end of 2007, really 2008 for all practical purposes, it was like a 2.5-year journey to get from the desktop printer to the actual printer. But it's an interesting thing. In that original book, The Go-Giver, the one with the red cover, there's a scene about halfway through the book where Joe, the hero of the book, we see Joe at home with his wife, Susan. It's a short chapter. It's the only time in the book where we see Susan, where we see Joe in his domestic life. And they have a little bit of conversation, and he makes a shift. He suddenly makes this shift in how he's acting with her, how he's behaving with her. And basically what's going on is she's kind of complaining about her day, and he's realizing that their life has kind of devolved into this place where they each air their grievances, and they're like two ships passing in the night. And he starts to genuinely listen to her and set aside some time, be empathetic, and makes this little shift. And it has this tremendous impact in their marriage. And it always was for me, it's not the most dramatic point in the book because there's much more dramatic business shifts that happen later on. But it always was for me kind of the heart of the book. It was for me the moment in the book where the lessons sunk in. It was the moment where the transformation, where you got to see the transformation that we're talking about actually happen. And for me, that was where this book was born, or at least it's one place where this book was born. That shift that happened in Joe is sort of at the heart of this larger shift that we're unpacking and describing in greater length in the Go-Giver marriage. And I think, when Anna first said, this would be a great book on marriage, I didn't immediately see how that would work. I didn't immediately see how we would translate the Go-Giver kind of model, the book model, into a book about marriage. But as we got to work on it, it was just really, really a incredibly rewarding experience to kind of watch the puzzle solve itself in front of our eyes.
Yeah, and Anna, how did you envision this book? When the concept kind of came to you and you saw the Go-Giver as a potential kind of springboard for a marriage book, what was your kind of creative process like in terms of what you thought the book would be?
Well, we have a habit every day of going for long walks. And so we were talking about the secrets in this book for years, and what were the things that we saw as essential. Now, for years, people have been asking us, what's this, what's your secret sauce in terms of your marriage? Because people always remark about how even though we've been together for 25 plus years, that we're like newlyweds. And, I feel like, the thing I wanted the most was that it wasn't just a parable. I wanted it to be a parable with the second half of the book is called the practice. And the practice is, how do you put it into action? How do you take that portion of the book, the parable, and translate it into your marriage or into your relationship? And the practice section of the book is short, just like the parable. You can read the entire book in just over an hour. But it puts in perspective, how do you practice these secrets? How do you employ them in a way that's meaningful and rich and that adds tremendous value to your relationship? And so that was my vision, was that it would have that the secrets would have a basis in developmental theory psychologically, and that the secrets would be real, applicable, and easy to put in place in your relationship.
Well, that's really good. Yeah. And so, you mentioned the book being, written as part, parable in the beginning, practice in the end, so how do the two hemispheres play into your strengths? I know that, John, did you focus on driving the parable part with input from Anna and then the reverse for the practice part? Or how did you guys write the two sections and put them together?
Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly. You must have been eavesdropping when we were writing it, because that's exactly what we did. And it's the parable, weaves around what we call, the subtitle of the book is A Little Story About the 5 Secrets to Lasting Love. So there's 5 secrets, just like every Go-Giver book is built around a series of 5 principles, that it's the story's job to take the character, the central character, or 2 characters in this case, who have a problem, right? Who are in a situation, who are facing a personal journey, is take these characters and get involved with them and follow them in their journey, and in the course of their journey, unwrap these 5 principles and these 5 secrets one at a time. That's the job of the parable, is to draw the reader through the discovery of these 5 secrets. And that's the storyteller job. That was really kind of my heavy lifting part. And the second part is, as Alan says, now we know what these are. Now we got these principles. Now let's have a practical walking tour. How do you make it actually work in real life? And we have a little back section in all the Go-Giver books where we do a little bit of writing about the principles in the parable. But I think this is the first time where we've taken the parable and spun it out into a full length guidebook. And I say full length, as Anna says, it's short. They're both short. Both halves are short. The whole thing is about 20,000 words, which is a short book. So it's about 10,000 words for a parable, 10,000 words for the guidebook. Boom, you're done in an hour and a half. But yeah, the first part was my job, and the second part was really Anna's writing.
And so, Anna, talk about your part. Talk about how you created the laws and to complement the parable. The 5 secrets of lasting love, that is.
Sure. The secrets we created together, and they were really developed based on developmental theory. So John and I talked about them a lot. And, when you go into any form of psychology, they talk about all different levels of development, from early childhood all the way through adolescence, young adult, and into being a full adult and beyond. There's just, if you're growing, if you're a person who's continuing to grow, you're continuing to go through cycles of development as you grow older. And you want those cycles to be complete, but every one of us arrives at childhood with parents that are capable or less capable or more capable. And so everyone has their own emotional process that they've gone through with their development. And so each secret was based on, again, developmental theory, but on what does it mean to have an ideal situation where you're getting what you need as you're developing. And so the secrets in a marriage are really aimed at going back and being able to not only feed, but in some cases heal some of those earlier places where you might not have been met. Maybe you were a child whose parent didn't listen and who you really weren't heard. Maybe you're a person who, didn't get a lot of attention or appreciation as a child. These are things that once you get in a marriage, they show up. I like to say that people arrive at a marriage with a lot of baggage, a lot of suitcases that are heavily packed. And as the marriage gets closer and, you're living under one roof together, all of a sudden those suitcases start unpacking themselves. And it's because whatever's there in your history, it's going to show up in your relationship. And, you're going to get into patterns of either trying to control your spouse or, codependence and different kinds of ways of behaving inside the relationship. So once we established what the secrets were, then John really focused on describing them in the parable. I really wanted the second half, the practice, to be a really clear explanation of what they are and why they're effective and why they're so important to us. For example, just being listened to. People want to be seen, heard, and understood and witnessed. This is a primary need that people have from infancy all the way until they die. And so, things like that are essential parts of these secrets.
I just want to jump in and stress that, the way I describe it, that is the sequence. Is the sequence the way it happened? In other words, we talked about the ideas, kind of the core ideas of the book. And then eventually I started writing on the parable. And then it was once the parable was really behind us is when Anna started to really unpack it all as the guide. So that there was a sequence, kind of a logical flow to the whole development.
Okay, so with the book, the main characters are Tom and Tess, and I love how you tied in Rachel's famous coffee again. Great job.
Hey, thank you.
But I mean, are they where do we find them when the book opens, and then where do they progress? What kind of evolution do we see in their marriage throughout the book?
Yeah. So, a couple things there. The first thing is, and this is just kind of incidental, but for anybody who's read The Go-Giver and maybe some of the other Go-Giver books, there are characters from every one of the other Go-Giver stories that reappear in this. So this is kind of like, a Star Wars movie where all of the original characters show up again, which is part of that is just fun, just for as like Easter eggs for our readers. A part of that is too, because we wanted to sort of track where some of these characters have come in their personal lives, because we've seen them in the business context before. So one of the first decisions was obviously the book about marriage. We're going to want to have not one hero, but two. We're going to have two protagonists, two main characters who are going to be in a marriage. We made a decision early on that, at first we thought, well, maybe this story should find two people who are in a marriage that's reached a crisis point. It's really, really bad. And no, we didn't go that way. The Tom and Tess are in a marriage where they've suffered through a lot of stress. They have a child with special needs who threw a real wrench in their domestic bliss early in their married life by presenting challenges that they never counted on. Well, because that kind of thing really happens. That's like real life. But it's not like their marriage is awful. It's not like they're on the verge of divorce. It's not like they're fighting and really nasty at each other. Not at all. They're deeply in love, but things aren't what they were once. Things aren't what they could be. And we did that intentionally because that's where a lot of people are. A lot of people are in relationships that aren't terrible, but they used to be better. Something's gone a little stale or has gotten a little distant, or it's just somehow it's not quite what it could be. And so the whole thing, in part because it's a business, it's a Go-Giver book, and in part because it's real world that we're trying to show. It starts out with a business situation. Tom is interviewing for a position that's a real high competition position at the top of his company, Rachel's Coffee. I won't give away too much of the story, but so he's facing this challenge, this interview. He's really nervous about it. He's throwing the dice. It's a very, very big deal. And he goes through this interview process at the same time that Tess is going through her struggles with their child and with her own situation. And I certainly won't say, where they get to, because this is a no spoilers interview. but it tracks the two of them through the course of a single day, going back and forth between Tom and Tess. And they meet a bunch of characters along the way who reveal little bits of these 5 secrets, who unveil them one at a time, and arrive at what we hope, like every Go Giver book, is a surprising yet satisfying conclusion.
Okay, now, Anna, I want to ask you this one, because people tend to marginalize books about marriage, and you know what I'm talking. And so what happens is, people will say, well, it's just like therapy. It's like counseling, where you have to drag someone in because they think, well, you're going to bring me to therapy, you're going to bring me down, you're going to make me to read this book because I'm such a bad and terrible partner, which isn't always the case. But that said, who is the audience for the book, and why should we change the way we think about marriage, not as something external to repair and fix, but when things are difficult, but as something that's holistic and organic to strengthen and grow in all seasons?
That's a great question, and one that I love because I spent a fair amount of time working with couples inside of a room, and I actually feel that the therapy model has many gifts and many strengths, but I work individually with people now. I work as a coach, and I work with one person in the marriage. And I don't try to drag the other partner in. I don't encourage them to drag the other partner in, because the only person that you can change in a marriage is you. And so the strength of the book is that these secrets are easy to apply. Once you understand their value, they're very easy to apply. And in my coaching work, we'll often take one secret at a time and we'll just apply it, that week. How did it work? And what people often come back and say is, wow, it was so simple, but oh my goodness, it was magic. This happened and that happened. And, they start reporting about the good stuff that came out of these simple little moments where they took the time to use these secrets in a way that, and we use the word secrets, but they're kind of like little habits, and they're not manipulative. They are not like little, manipulative bullet things that you can do that will change your marriage, but rather they do change the tone of your marriage, because they're based on, again, developmental theory and things that are real and serious and authentic for people. So it isn't about trying to figure out the strife in a marriage. It isn't about trying to change your partner. It is about changing yourself. And I think that that's why people find that it's an easy book to share with others. And I found that in certain reading groups and book clubs and women's groups, the book already with our pre-readers, there's a sense of fire to get to it. People really want to be able to share it because they got so much from it themselves. So I think that, if you're going to get into some didactic book that's all about, the psychology of what's wrong with your partner or why your early childhood trauma is killing your marriage, all of those things can be true. Your early childhood trauma could be killing your marriage. But there are things that you can do every day to change the way you interact in the marriage, the way you bring yourself, that will have a huge impact. And like the other Go Giver books, it is about bringing value and adding value specifically to your spouse or partner. And that's significant because it's...
Yeah, I would love to piggyback on that just for a sec, Chris. In your question, you asked about, you evoked this image of, dragging I'm going to get dragged into this, or you want me to read this book because, maybe I'm terrible, our marriage is terrible because I'm just such an ogre, or so there's sort of that pall of negativity, and that's very consciously the opposite of where we're coming from. So the idea of focusing on what's wrong, either what either one of us is doing wrong, quote wrong, or what's wrong in the marriage, is often what people kind of instinctively assume a marriage book is going to be focused on, or a marriage therapy is going to be focused on. What we focus on isn't what's wrong, it's what you can do, what's right, and doing more of that. It's kind of like focusing on what's wrong with the person or focusing on what's right with the person. There's a very well practiced truth about habits, which is that the only way to really get rid of a bad habit is not to focus on the bad habit, but to replace it with a good habit. You can't sit there and say, I'm not going to bite my fingernails. I'm not going to bite my fingernails. I'm not going to bite my fingernails. You got to find something to replace it with. It's the same with eating. It's the same with the abuse of alcohol and drugs. Any kind of habit, laziness or bad exercise or bad posture, any kind of habit you can come up with that's destructive. The most productive way to deal with it is to replace it with a good habit, with a positive habit. That's what this is all about. It's looking for the positive behaviors that we can do every day and just focusing on those, amplifying those. What you focus on, you tend to increase.
Well, that's a great answer. And it leads me to my next question. Years ago, back when I was a bachelor, I had two roommates. I was having a serious conflict with one of my roommates. And so my roommate, Ryan, pulled me aside and he's like, Jonesy, he used to call me Jonesy. Hey, Jonesy, he said, one of the things that you need to learn is that you cannot be angry at someone when you're serving them. He said, can you find a way to serve Matt? Can you find a way to give to him? And I feel like in the spirit of the Go Giver books, that's what we're looking at here. You talk about the idea is lasting love. It's about the principle of the Go Giver, which, as we know, is it's about reaching out to others first, not expecting to receive things, but giving, because giving makes us better, better people, makes us better salespeople, better husbands, better whatever. So with that in mind, how does being someone who gives first change the dynamic of your relationship, as opposed to someone who's looking for the partner to give to me first? I'm not going to budge until you give, which again is contrary to the spirit of Go Giver.
I'm going to say that to me, the fundamental thing it does is that it shifts your perspective from looking at the relationship as from being transactional to being organic. And what I mean is the transactional is like, who gets the benefit, you or me? It's like a deal between two people where it's like a zero-sum game. If I agree to watch the movie you want to see, then I don't get to watch the movie I want to see. And so you win and I lose. That kind of who gets the bigger cookie, who gets the bigger pile of bananas, that kind of attitude is really, really common. It's really, really natural. It's Anna would I imagine relate that also to very early childhood development, where you see two 1-year-olds going, it's my toy. I don't want to share it with you. This is a natural, instinctive human response, but it's not a mature one. The mature response is the organic one, which says, if I share with you, in fact, if I focus on you, if I put my attention on adding value to your life, if I approach the next part of my day saying, how can I make my wife's life better? How can I make her life happier? What can I do today to improve her life? What happens is she wins and I win. We both win, because what we're doing here is we're two people who, yes, we're two separate people, but we live in an overlap. There's a diagram in the book that shows two circles and then the place where they overlap. And that overlap, as Anna describes it, is the us. The overlap is our relationship. And what we're really doing is not just giving to our spouse, we're giving to the us. We're giving to the relationship. We're growing the usness of it. And that ends up being a rising tide that lifts both our ships. I just evoked you, Anna, several times. I'm speaking for you, which I should not do.
No, that's perfect, because
the microphone is yours.
It gives me a launch pad that's really pretty personal. So let me take it right to the core of the things that people argue about in their marriage. Let's talk about sex. What if sex wasn't about what can I get? Mm-hmm. Or, how often can I get? What if sex really was a gift? What if you made the decision every week to gift your spouse with intimacy that was really personal and lovely, because it was just a gift you wanted to give them because you knew that it mattered to them. And I've had this conversation with many, many people, both women and men. And because sex becomes very transactional. Sex for a lot of people is, I want it this way. I don't want it that way. I want the lights out, not on. I want this. I don't want to have to wear fancy negligees. People really get you really see their feelings when it comes to intimacy. But I try to encourage the people that I share this with to really understand it doesn't matter if you're 25 or if you're 65. Sex is a gift. Intimacy is a gift. Why not give it? Wrap it with a bow. Because it is one of the ways and the places where people let down their hair. I hear from clients all the time that say, oh, we didn't just have sex. We were giggling in bed for an hour afterwards. I mean, it was a wonderful day. It was a wonderful night. It set the whole tone for the weekend. It's that idea that, we know from the happiness movement and we know from neurology and neuroscience that all acts of giving not just improve your happiness, they improve your heart, they improve every cell in your body, they reduce depression, they add so much dimension to relationships, they create greater closeness. So in the act of giving to your spouse, in all the 5 different ways that we describe that you can give to your spouse, you can, in just a few minutes a day, do things that take the marriage and take the relationship to a much deeper level because your spouse realizes that you appreciate them, that you care about them, and that you are gifting them with things that matter to you and to them.
Ooh, that's a very good answer. Which brings me to a question I'd like to ask you. How do you hope that readers read this book?
Great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah. I'm going to give that to you, sweetheart.
Well, I'll tell you, we've had a number, we've probably had 35 early readers, people that we are our inner circle of friends and close colleagues and people who were endorsing the book read it already. And some of them ended up, they were in marriages, but they read it individually, each person in the couple. But then they were so compelled that they got together, and in many cases, they read chapter by chapter at night before they went to sleep. And they started talking about it and practicing it. And we had one couple that had been married more than 30 years, and they said, you have no idea. Our whole entire dimension of our marriage has shifted. We're doing things for each other in ways that are joyful and beautiful. And there's just an energy between us that's like we're kind of giddy with delight at pleasing each other, at giving to each other in ways that we know the other person wants. And so it's been really a joy for us to watch. So there's no right or wrong. It can be that you read it alone. It can be that you read it with your spouse. It can be that you give it as a gift for a wedding or an engagement. And what your roommate said to you was really powerful. You can't be angry at somebody that you're supposed to be serving. Servant leadership, and in some ways I think of marriage as a servant experience, because if you're really there adding value and caring about your spouse's life, then you want their life to be rich and beautiful. You want to do everything you can to make their life better. But it isn't what society tells us. It isn't about going out and buying jewels and fancy gifts and things like that. It's the little things. It's the nuances in a relationship. One person that read the book said she approached her husband after she read the book and she said, sweetheart, when you talk to our children, my heart just opens up and feels flooded with love for you because you're such a good father, and you unwind fights between them. You're always on their team. You let them know how much you love them, but you're just the most incredible dad. And I just want you to know that I love you as a husband, but when I watch you as a father, I'm just moved over. And he came back to us as well because he had read it and said, I just don't even know how to describe this. It's just been, our whole house is warm. It's warm. It's a different house.
Just
So
want to add a piggyback PS on there, which is, Anna said there's no wrong way to read the book. I'm going to add that you can read the second half first too. You don't have to read the parable first and then read the practice. In fact, if parables are not your thing, you can jump right into the second half, and then see how the after that, see how the parable unwinds that or winds that up or highlights that. So yeah, there's no wrong way to read it. The one thing I will say, and this is to emphasize something Anna said, is that to practice the things that are in the book, because they are simple, they are approachable. It's not a big dramatic deal. It's not where you have to make some gigantic commitment to make some huge change. They're very simple things you can do every day.
And I want to piggyback on that because John has written a lot of parables. He wrote The Latte Factor with David Bach. He wrote Out of the Maze, which was the sequel to Who Moved My Cheese with Spencer Johnson. He's written all of the Go-Giver books. And I believe, and there are people in New York who think that John's just a genius at parables, and I agree with them. But I think
Crazy
this
New
is...
Yorkers.
I'm talking about the publishing world, of course. But I think this is John's most beautiful parable ever. And since this is a podcast about writing, for any of you that are out there that are budding writers, telling a story and telling it well is a powerful thing. And it doesn't matter if it's the caption on an Instagram post. If it's done well, it hits home. So, this is a parable to read because it's short, it's amazing, and it's on the same level as The Little Prince and The Alchemist. It has that kind of magic in it. It has a fable inside the parable that's like eating a piece of candy. I mean, it's phenomenal. So I have to say that. My husband is brilliant, but this parable is really incredible, and I invite you to read it as well, even if you start in the back of the book.
I want to say this is not the only reason I love this person, but it definitely is one. She says such nice things about me.
What? The fact that she said that does not surprise me. I read your vows, and your vows were like super poetic.
Oh,
so I was like, I'm sure she swooned on her wedding day.
I did.
Now, and with that,
the very first conversation we ever had when we first met, I mean, literally our first conversation, she told me about an article she read of mine and how much she loved it. And I was like, damn, man, she had me right there.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What was it like to write with your spouse?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, first I'll say, honestly, I didn't know what it was going to be like. And it isn't like I had fears or concerns, because we've done a lot of other things together. We've done business consulting to corporations together. We've built businesses together. We've written marketing material together. So we worked on a lot of projects together, as well as building a life and a home together. But writing is a really personal thing for me, Chris. It's like, I've almost every one of the 30 plus books I've published have been co-authorships. That's kind of my business model. I write with a co-author, but you know me, what that really means is I interview my co-author, I get to know them, I read their stuff, I find out all about them, and then I close the door and I write by myself, like I write the book. I'm very private, very isolated, I like to do that in a closed room. And this was the most open door co-authorship I've ever had. This was, I shared the process more than, it was a real 50-50 process. And I didn't know what it would be like until we were smack dab in the middle of it. And it was awesome. She'd bring me stuff for the she'd bring me drafts of stuff for the second half of the practice part, the guidebook. And I'd read it and I'd go, well, I won't use 4-letter words here. I shouldn't on this podcast, but I'll go, holy crap. This is really good. Why was I surprised? It was just so much fun. It was talk about candy. It was like unwrapping little candies every day that my wife brought me. So it ended up being just an absolute joy working together.
And I guess what I'll add is that this is the very first time that John's written a book with a co-author where 50% of the book was written by the co-author. And, John's an incredible editor, but, it was really fun to feel like I could contribute in that way and that he was really excited about what I was contributing. So it was really meaningful for both of us.
And technically speaking, just on a technical side, like looking at that guidebook, the second half, we say it was mostly written by her. So what would happen is she would write sections, bring them to me. I would look at them, suggest some edits, give it back to her. Every now and then I would suggest a thing to add. And the same thing with the parable. She would read over drafts. But largely it was a process of batting the ball back and forth over the net. Still, we were each writing on our own. It isn't like we sat down at a table together, the two of us writing at the same time. So there may be co-authorships writing teams who work that way. But it was, for us, it was, practically speaking, it was one of us would write something, kick it off to the other who would look at it and say, okay, cool. And then maybe evaluate a little bit, make some suggestions and kick it back. It was a back and forth process.
Yeah. So did it change your level of appreciation for one another? Like, Anna, appreciating him, like appreciating more of the work he does as an author. And then John, you appreciate more of the work that she does, as, in the therapy setting?
I will answer that and say my appreciation and respect for what she does was already at a high level. Didn't see how I could go any higher, but it has gone up quite a bit. In the process of doing this book, it's not just the book. It's the book, and then it's these conversations we're having in podcasts, and it's the work we're doing in the programs we're putting together. Even her Instagram posts. She just started her Instagram account, a matter of weeks, a few months ago, and she's posting these little Instagram nuggets, these little Instagram gems every day that just blow my mind. The content in there, it's just so rich. So yeah, my respect for her and what she knows, her insights in the whole world of relationships and dynamics has just skyrocketed in this process. Over to you.
Yeah, I could be the original John Mann cheerleader, complete with pom poms. I have been reading his books, and in fact, in the dedication for his first novel is dedicated to me because for all these years, from way back, I've been telling him that I thought he would make an incredible novelist. And because he tells such compelling stories and he develops characters in a very rich way they're believable. They're human. And so I kept telling him that. And, I would see the part of him that didn't believe. And he would say, yep, well, thanks, hon, and walk away. And then, fast forward, he just wrote his first novel last year. And, Publishers Weekly called it one of the best novels of the year. And so, yeah, I just think he's remarkable and that his writing is just brilliant.
Look at you two. Now, something that's kind of trending, or it's been a little trendy for the last year, is kind of this idea of power couples. You see it on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but we have couples who are doing more business together. They're working together, collaborating more together in professional ways. For couples who may want to take that next level and write books together, what do you suggest they do, or how do you recommend they work together in a way that, because writing a book, like you said, is intimate, it's deeply personal, you're getting into each other's heads. How do you encourage them to write together without getting to get into each other's head but not get at each other's throats?
I'm going to jump in there and say, one of the secrets, there's 5 secrets in the book, and one of them is something we call allow. And allow is about letting the other person be who they are, the way they are, and not trying to change them or control them. So the first thing I'd say in a writing partnership is that chances are really good both co-writers have their own strengths. And chances are really good that they're not the same or they're not exactly the same. So you're each going to have your areas. And I think the first thing you want to do is honor both people's style and look at the ways that they can both contribute to the project and to the process without trying to, either one of us trying to make the other one write the way we write, or edit the way we edit, or think the way we think, or, some people like to work with outlines. Some people like to work spontaneously, the Stephen King method. People have their different approaches. You gotta honor both of them and find a way for them to work together.
I would agree, and what I would add to it as well is that we're in a unique position in that John has written 30 books, and 4 of them were New York Times bestsellers, and 5 have been national bestsellers, and he has his chops as a writer are very well developed, and he is one of the most phenomenal editors I've ever known. And I have actually been the senior editor of a national magazine, so I can write. But, I trust his editing just incredibly. So I would always give him last pass on editing because I really trust his ability. I think that if a couple are wanting to move into that power zone, that, drawing up outlines and then discussing them and kind of really deciding who's going to write what, who's the expert at which areas would be a great way to get started. But then once you've got it going, instead of one of you, if neither one of you sees yourself as a really strong editor, then get a third-party editor to just go over the whole thing once you've got it written, or hire somebody that you trust in the writing world, because I see that as being the place where things could get taken apart. In some cases, in the back of the book, John would shift something to a more moderate language that wasn't as psychology driven, and I would come back and say, no, it's really got to stay in that zone because people won't understand it if they don't understand the psychological component of what development or developmental theory looks like. And he'd go, oh, okay. So we were able to work those things out very easily because our relationship is just, it's quarter century long and still moving forward with great love and appreciation. But, for any young couple, I would say if you think it's going to be a point of contention, do get an outside editor in there so that you have that person who can just help you to shape it and form it in a way that's really cohesive.
I'm going to add to that there's a skill set I think it's really, really critical to develop here in this process, which is one that people often don't think of, and that is you need to learn how to critique. There's an art to critique, and or at least there's certainly a skill to it. And one of the secrets to good critique, because you're both going to be critiquing each other's contributions. That's part of the game, part of the deal. One of the secrets to good critiquing is to understand that writing is a very personal thing. I don't care who you are and how thick your skin is. Writing is very personal, and showing what you've written to somebody else, no matter who they are, is a gesture of great vulnerability. So one of the things you want to do when you critique the other person's writing is start from the positive. Look for the things that you love most about it and say, I love that you did this. This passage, it blew my mind. I love this. I love that. I think this works really, really, really well. Always start there. Then you say, I am not sure how this passage works. And when you get to the things that you think don't work or should change, approach them with at least a little bit of diplomacy. And I'm not saying to soft soap or step over the real issues. If something stinks, you got to face it head on. If this sentence doesn't work, if this paragraph goes on too long, like this answer I'm giving right now, you have to face it. But you want to do it gently, always remembering that the other person's feelings are laid bare when they show raw draft writing.
All right. So in terms of your own marriage, what richness has writing together added? Like, was it fun to write together? Like, did you guys have any little rituals you did? I know you talked about writing alone, but did you kind of come together at the end of the day and just kind of talk about what it was like to write together, sections you're working on, or bounce ideas off each other? How did it, add a layer of more love into your own marriage?
All of the above, Alex. It was just incredible. We would bounce ideas off each other. We would come back and forth with all kinds of material. And, I just feel like it was, excuse me, Chris, I apologize. We would come back and be just so much, there was so much affection for the fact that we could bounce it back and forth, that we could talk about it. We would go for our long walks at night and just, continue to bounce ideas. And one of the positive things that's come out of it is that we're moving on to write more books, and we're excited to be writing together. It's something that I've always dreamed of, but it's always kind of been John's domain.
Yeah, and I'll just get a little personal here and say, actually, for years, Anna has been talking about us writing books together, and I was always the one kind of putting out my hands and saying, well, we'll see. I'm not sure. I got to back in a way, because I didn't know how it was going to work. I like I said, I'm the guy. When it's time to actually write the manuscript, I close my door. I don't turn off my phone. I don't want to hear input from anybody. So I was not only surprised, but very pleasantly surprised how great this was. And one of the things that's come out of it for us is that the book itself has now grown to be more than the book. As I mentioned, we developed this coaching program, and we developed some workshops around the content in the book. And it's kind of developing into a whole entity on its own, rooted in the book, but that goes well beyond the book. I did not foresee all that. I did not see us doing that together, and it's really, really cool. It's totally enriched our marriage, and also kind of given birth to a whole new dimension of our career together.
Yeah, and that's my next question. Actually, is on the website, you guys have special offers and have programs for readers. Do you guys want to talk about those a little bit?
Sure,
go ahead. Sweetie. Oh, you go ahead. Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll go. I'll go ahead. No, you first. First you mentioned the special offer, and here's the thing on that. The book comes out on March 8th, and we wanted to put together a really juicy premium offer, and for people to both as an encouragement to get the book ahead of time, to pre-order the book, and also as a thank you. I published a bunch of books, and there have been a handful of those where we really developed a strong kind of, not just a fan base, but almost like a community around the book. I think, Chris, maybe the first book you and I talked about was The Recipe, maybe where we first started our friendship. But, this whole group of readers sprung up around The Recipe. Same thing has happened for my book, How to Write Good. A whole group of readers that's like an advocacy group / community around that book. We want to thank those people. There's already people out there who are talking about the book and championing the book. And so we put together these gifts, and they're 2 video masterclass. We call them mini masterclasses. They're just Anna and me sitting on our couch, chatting through a couple of issues. One is called The Mindset of Lasting Love. It's about a half an hour long. And one of them is called De-escalating Conflict. It's the same, a little bit longer. And so those are gifts that are only for when those aren't like for sale. We're not going to put those out to the bigger audience. Those are just for the people who pre-order the book. And we're also going to hold a live fireside chat via Zoom the week after the book comes out. We're setting up in Q&A format with a moderator, so that Dan Rockwell, the guy who created Leadership Freak blog, leadership guy, who's a dear friend. Dan's going to moderate that and take people's questions over Zoom and feed those to us. So we're going to have a blast with that fireside chat. And that's just for the people who pre-order the book. That's just the pre-order offer, and which is on our site. And then there are also the programs. I don't know, maybe you can say a word about that.
Yeah, we're doing a number of workshops for between 8 and 20 people. And we've decided to have them open to all women, all men, and or mixed audiences. We've already, got some churches and different places that have decided that they really want to offer this to their congregation. We also have, just women's groups and other situations where people have said, hey, we've all read this book. We all love the book. Let's get together and talk about it and really put this into action. And what's fun is that those workshops include, some accountability exercises where people in the group can partner up with another person and sort of keep track of how they're doing with the different secrets and working on that stuff. So those are just little 2-hour workshops. They're a great little opportunity. When we do this fireside chat, that's an open conversation to anybody that pre-orders, but also with our coaching program, which will be a longer, more dynamic situation where somebody's going to learn to be a Go-Giver Marriage coach. That's going to start in the fall, and we're very, very excited to start training coaches around the world. And yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. It gives people that are already coaches another arrow in their quiver. It gives people who are therapists or who are clergy or who are already leading women's groups or doing other kinds of dynamic work an opportunity to train in something that they can use as both as an educator, because we'll train them to run workshops like these 8 to 20 person workshops, as well as to be able to work with individuals. So lots of opportunity. We're very excited about it simply because there's been such a great response already. So we can be reached at on our website. If anybody wants to be in contact with us about these details, it's gogivermarriage.com, and they can contact us there.
All right. And John, you said something really interesting, and I want to ask you about it. You had mentioned that it was almost accidental, like it wasn't something you had planned to like develop a community around the book. So with that in mind, how did that inspiration hit you when you looked at the book and said, wow, we've got something more here than just a book. We've got a platform here. We've got something that can really help people on a different level.
Anna had the intention, even before we wrote the book, Anna had the intention of developing this coaches program that she just talked about, the Go-Giver Marriage Coaches Training Program. So that plan was kind of in the works already. I think it was as a result of not only writing the book, but also talking about the book. And, talking with our publisher. We have a fabulous publisher who's really partnering with us in a beautiful way. But, talking with our publisher and talking with our social media assistant and just working with the material of the book and how we want to bring it out to the world, it just felt like it started to grow into something bigger than itself. And as I say, I've had that happen before, but I've never had it with other books. That certainly happened with the Go-Giver itself. But that was spearheaded principally by Bob. It certainly happened with the recipe, but neither Chef Charles or I really took that a whole lot farther because we then had to go on with our careers and do other stuff. It's happened with the novels, Steel Fear and now Cold Fear, and that's starting to develop its own life. But it's never happened with somebody that I was married to. And so this is a whole new thing that it's bigger than I foresaw it being.
All right. And then in closing, Anna, she's already told us, where to find you guys, but you said the book comes out March the 8th.
Yes.
And it's basically wherever books are sold, and then
right.
We're driving people. What's the website again? It was gogivermarriage.com.
That's it. All one word. No hyphens, no spaces, gogivermarriage.com. And all of our social links are on there. You can also email us through that contact page, and those emails go directly to us, so you can get as personal as you want. Nobody else is going to read those emails but us.
All right. And was there anything that you wanted to leave our listeners with before we close up?
We should each do something. I'll say this, and then I'll turn it over to you. How about that?
Sure.
I will say that there's a line in the book where one of the older, wiser characters says this thing about the purpose of marriage. He says the purpose of marriage is to give yourself away, is to give yourself to another person, and in the process, become your best self. And I just want to leave it with, there's this paradox of marriage, which is that you are giving yourself, in a way it looks like a compromise at the front door. It looks like you're, instead of just leaving your laundry all over the place where you're used to doing it, now you're having to clean up because you've got another person in the house. So it might look like you're giving up some things, giving up some freedoms. The truth of it is that the growth of a marriage, we liken it to the growth of a tree in our book. What it does is it grows you. It grows you into becoming a more fulfilled, a more joyous, a bigger version of yourself. In fact, the best person that you could. I think marriage ends up being a gift back to you. Over to you, sweetheart.
Wow, I don't even know what to follow with on that. I'm speechless because I just want to piggyback on that. I agree. I think that when you stop trying to get your needs met in a gimme, gimme, gimme kind of way, and you open the door to bringing value to your spouse and giving, just letting your life be about being somebody who, the giving generation. I think of the younger generation as being so much wiser than our generation was. And I think that one of the ways they're going to show that wisdom is a lot of them came out of homes that were divorced. And I think that they have a greater desire and a greater need to stay married and to make it work, but not in a compromising kind of way, but rather in a way that's about learning and growing and becoming greater people. And so I want to encourage your listeners who are writers, that want to write together, do it. Explore every avenue that's rich, because the more that you give to your marriage and to your spouse, the richer your life will become, and the stronger your marriage will become. It's powerful. So I just want to say thank you for supporting us in any way. This book is such a labor of love for us. We have one driving desire, and that is to save a lot of marriages. I mean, really, to save a lot of marriages. We believe the Go-Giver concepts, which have spread around the world, are so powerful that we hope this book is a gift.
Awesome. Well, John, Anna, thank you so much for joining me today on the episode.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to be here, Senor.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon in the future.
You got it.
How's that for inspiring? I hope you take action on one thing you learned in today's episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast and left a review on iTunes, I want to encourage you to do that too. Finally, be sure to visit chrisjonesinc.com to sign up for updates. Don't worry, I won't spam you. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode.